In all honesty, I had no intention of attending the party. An invitation had been given to me by Janelle on a whim that evening, and I was on the verge of not responding to it. It was exhausting to work. Over the course of the whole week, I had spent my time troubleshooting lines of code that seemed more like ancient scripture than contemporary infrastructure. But something about the way she wrote, "You need to stop rotting alone and talk to humans," made me feel noticed and called out, but in a manner that only a friend who knew the parts of you that were silent could do. As a result, I pulled on a denim jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and drove throughout the city to her apartment. It was a jungle of half-empty wine glasses, candle smoke, and some indie music buzzing from Bluetooth speakers the instant I walked into that flat. I was at a loss for words. The majority of the visitors were engaged in clicking, rehashing old inside jokes, and holding in their hands miniature paper plates as if they were shields. I made my way to the snack table after taking a quick look around the room and giving a few nods to those I recognized. A traditional method of social escape. The moment I saw her was then. In the vicinity of the chips and guacamole, she stood by herself, wearing a mustard yellow top with off-the-shoulder sleeves that, for some reason, made her appear both regal and as if she was unaware of her impressive beauty. In addition to having her arms crossed, she possessed that obvious expression of someone who was contemplating whether or not they ought to have stayed at home. There was no phone in her hand, and she was not participating in any false messaging. She was simply standing still as the world around her buzzed without her permission. What compelled me to stroll over there is a mystery to me. Perhaps it was the fact that I detested it when other people felt like they were out of place. Perhaps it was the way in which her eyes swept over the room in a way that was both curious and cautious. On the other hand, it's possible that I was already a little bit doomed to fail. I reached for the salsa, looked at her, and said, "I think this dip may have just filed a health violation." Her head suddenly turned toward me, and for a fraction of a second, I felt a great deal of anxiety developing inside of me. How would I feel if she thought I was acting strangely? On the other hand, she laughed, which was not very polite. I couldn't help but chuckle out loud. "Please leave me alone." On the contrary, this was profound and unexpected, and it shattered the air that existed between us like a spark. That laugh, which was unfiltered, genuine, and a little bit hoarse, pierced my chest like a bullet. While she was reaching for a chip, she responded with a raised eyebrow and asked, "That bad, huh? If you end up with food poisoning at 3 o'clock in the morning, don't blame me for it." She said this while chewing on the chip. "I will hold you personally responsible for this." After that, we continued to converse for a considerable amount of time, standing just there by the snack table as if the rest of the party did not exist. The woman introduced herself to me as Mariah. I informed her that my name was Julian. From that point on, it was simple. We did not engage in that phony banter about dating apps. Introductions written in the resume format. We conversed as if we were former friends catching up. It was like there was a melody to her voice. On occasion, playful, and on other occasions, low and reflective. When she was a child, she told me about her childhood in Chapel Hill and how she would read novels with a flashlight under her covers later than usual before going to bed. The story I told her was about how I used to disassemble radios in order to figure out how they functioned. In addition, there were occasions when I was unable to put them back together. Again, she chuckled at that statement. When it seemed inevitable that we would talk about our past relationships, I used a light touch, but she was honest. She brought up a long-term connection she had with a person named Tobias while she was in college. She managed to make it sound unimportant, as if it were a memory stowed away in a box in the attic. "It was a clean ending," she remarked. "We merely came to the realization that we were not each other's person. No big deal." I gave a slight nod. Neither did I press. Even though I didn't feel like I belonged there just yet, I relegated the name to the back of my mind. It is not out of jealousy, but rather just knowledge. At approximately midnight, the party came to an end. There was a time when Janelle walked over, gave me a wink, and whispered to Mariah, "He is the least boring man in this room." "You made a good choice," Mariah said, turning pink, but she did not move away. She shivered somewhat at some point, and I reflexively handed her my jacket. I was surprised by her reaction. In the beginning, she was unwilling, but I persisted. The exchange of fabric and warmth, which was a seemingly insignificant act, gave the impression of being the beginning of something. Upon her final acceptance of the item and the subsequent insertion of her arms into the sleeves, I witnessed the most subtle and delicate grin appear on her lips. Similar to a photograph that I was never required to shoot, that particular moment is still present in the recesses of my mind. During the time that I was walking her to her car, I was half expecting the night to go completely silent. Instead, she grinned and leaned against her door, tilted her head, and asked, "You're not like most guys. Is that a compliment or a red flag?" She then leaned against her door. I was lying in bed later that night, without a jacket on, and I remember saying, "I'll let you know." I was wondering why that laugh, the one she gave when I joked about the salsa, kept resonating in my head. The aroma of her perfume was still faint on the sleeves, and I was wondering why it was happening. I was never one to be romantic in nature. In the majority of my interactions, I was the one who was reasoning. In contrast, everything had felt so flowing, so simple, and so warm when she was around. After a period of 2 months, we began to see one other on an almost weekly basis. In addition to going to late-night movies, we attended food truck festivals. We had a disagreement about the music. She was a fan of traditional soul music. I was a jazz guitarist. Her sister Riley was the one who introduced me to her. I ultimately introduced her to Malik, who is my closest friend, and we became friends. Everyone admired her well. Sharp was the name that my mother gave her. He told me that she was the one who brought the brightness in my eyes. At the end of the 6th month, we relocated to a modest residence in Brookside. It was ours despite the fact that it had 1 bedroom, a heater that was prone to erratic behavior, and a used couch that was slightly sagging in the middle. "We made a nest," she cried as she stood in the middle of the living room, which was completely empty, and threw her arms up into the air. Moving day had arrived. I couldn't help but giggle because that was just how I felt at the time. In the year and a half that followed, the proposition was made. Since we were making pizza from scratch, we were the only 2 people in the kitchen, and we were barefoot and covered in flour. There was nothing glamorous about it. I knelt down and hung a dish towel that was coated with sawdust over my shoulder. I offered the ring to him while smiling stupidly. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she had flour on her cheek when she answered yes. I was under the impression that I had found the one true love of my life at that time. The kind of love that was the stuff of stories, the kind that began with a chuckle beside the snack table and ended in a relationship that would last forever. The term forever is one that people use far too frequently. What I did not realize at the time was that laughter may sometimes be the most audible beginning of something lovely, or it can be the quiet prelude to something breaking. If I had realized at the time how everything would turn out, perhaps I would have been able to hold back that initial laugh for a little bit longer. Learn to remember not only the sensation, but also the sound of it, mostly due to the fact that many years later, I would be clinging to memories like that, trying to comprehend how a love that began with such sincerity could go on to drift away in such a quiet manner. When I was in that moment, however, I was not considering any of that. During that time, I was nothing more than a man who was falling in love with a woman who smiled like a promise and laughed like honesty. When we were newly married, the first year was gentle, like sunlight streaming in through the curtains on a lazy Sunday. When I woke up with her by my side, I thought to myself, this is what peace feels like. Our beats merged together effortlessly. Morning coffee rituals, shared playlists on Spotify, and heated disputes about whether or not to use the dishwasher or wash the dishes by hand each morning. A disagreement arose over trivial matters. Of course, that is the case. On the other hand, it was the kind of conflict that was resolved with a chuckle or a sluggish apology and a kiss on the forehead. The aroma of cinnamon candles and freshly laundered laundry permeated our condo. Whether it was her humming as she was brushing her teeth or my tapping on the keyboard late at night while she was reading on the couch, it sounded exactly the same. The life that we created was not the most luxurious, but it was ours. Home was not a physical location. It turned out to be Mariah, and that was the final piece of the puzzle. We were able to locate each other, which brought relief to both of our families. Riley, her sister, serve as our family's unofficial third wheel. As a result of my ankle sprain, Malik immediately became her basketball partner. The evenings became filled with gaming nights. The weekends evaporated into oblivion. It's a privilege to be her husband. Even though we were out shopping for groceries, she would smile at me as if it were still our honeymoon. I would find sticky notes smuggled in my laptop bag by her. I have faith in you, nerd. One of them is yet to be lost by me, held in place between the receipts in my previous wallet. There was a hallowed quality to the fact that our delight was so uncomplicated. The flickers, on the other hand, were present. When you initially look, you don't realize that the light is changing. There's a noticeable chill in the air in the room. That was the beginning of it. Things are not obvious. Once, while we were in a bookshop, we happened to run into an old acquaintance of hers from college. The instant that he said the name Tobias, everything in her body became rigid. It was a courteous smile, but it was a touch too big, almost like a mask. The manner that she chuckled when he inquired about him was strained and high-pitched, and it fell off abruptly. I cracked a joke as we were leaving the room. Earlier, you gave off the impression of a politician trying to avoid a scandal. Despite the fact that she laughed, her eyes did not open. She instantly stated, "I haven't thought about him in years," and she meant it. It was too soon. I'm not a pushover. That was the kind of guy I didn't want to be. The one who was so envious that he was digging into her past as if it were treasure or poison. Each one of us has a history. I had deference to hers. I had faith in her. On the other hand, the holiday season arrived. During that particular year, Janelle dropped by for Christmas dinner. It is her first time coming to visit us as a guest. Her laughter was so loud that it could fill an entire room, and she brought wine with her. After we had finished our drinks, we began to discuss our time spent in college. The recollections long gone. Janelle then made the statement while Mariah was chuckling and feeling relaxed. "Remember how Tobias surprised everyone at that Halloween party by showing up dressed as a professor of zombies? I was on the verge of throwing your drink at him." It was too loud for Mariah to giggle. With her hands clenching the wine glass more tightly than was really necessary, she leaned forward. "Tobias, you amaze me." She said this while biting her lip, and that he was such a mess. In my opinion, he still has that unattractive beard. I am not sure what it was, but the manner in which she uttered his name has left an impression on me all these years. Not what she said, but the manner in which she said it. As if she needed to demonstrate that she didn't care. As if she wanted to laugh him off the face of the earth. The roads that led back to where he lived were still familiar to a portion of her thinking. As I entered the living room later that evening, I noticed that she was sitting on the couch with her phone blazing in her palm. The Instagram app was being scrolled through by her. It was while I was gazing at old party pictures that I leaned over the back of the couch and said, as if she were a teenager who had been caught, she sprang quickly and shut her screen. While she was moving her hair away from her face, she said, "Just checking something." I was curious to know if Tobias still had the appearance of a raccoon. I stifled a chuckle, and she shrugged her shoulders. I didn't press. I just said, "Yep, it's still unfortunate." Despite the fact that I entered the kitchen and began washing the dishes, the sound of the screen locking remained in my ears like a distant alarm. From that night onward, I became aware of quite little shifts. Over time, she became more absent, only a little bit at first, with shorter kisses and slower responses. When we would curl up on the couch, her body would lean a little further away than it used to when we were together. There was still warmth, but it was less intense and more muted. I engaged in additional activities. When I stopped at the gas station, I purchased her favorite chocolate and brought it home with me. I am making preparations for an unexpected weekend trip to Asheville, taking on additional responsibilities in order to give herself time to relax. There was a smile on her face as she said, "Thank you." However, there is a hollowness located behind everything. This is the kind of smile you give when someone offers you a present that you have no idea what to do with. It was simply stress, I reminded myself, and she was okay. Her job had been challenging for her. There are new obligations and deadlines. In addition to working longer hours, she was also commuting more. It may have been that. There was no other option. However, I arrived home late after a team meeting on one particular evening. The phone was still in her hand under the blanket, despite the fact that she was in bed and acting as though she was sleeping. Her respiration was irregular and erratic. Her shoulders appeared to be sore. Without making a sound, I just changed my clothing and lay down next to her, facing each other, counting the seconds that passed between each of her sluggish, phony breaths. I just stood there staring at the ceiling. I softly turned around and stared at her face in the dim nighttime light of the moon when she had finally fallen asleep. Although she appeared to be at ease, I was not. The twisting of my gut was a result of my attempt to decipher every glance, every chuckle, and every moment that I might have overlooked. One can experience a certain kind of loneliness when they are in the same room as the person they love, yet they still have the impression that they are in a foreign place within their own home. I was beginning to feel lonely, but I didn't want to accuse anyone of being the cause of it. For the sake of a suspicion, I did not want to risk losing all we had. In no way had she committed any wrongdoing. No, not really. I was not going to be that insecure man who caused a fight over old ghosts because she was just being aloof and distracted despite my best efforts. I was unable to shake the feeling that something was shifting despite my best efforts. When I asked her, "How was your day?" the lady who used to tell me everything now hesitated. The woman who used to snuggle into my lap with popcorn during movie night now sat at the opposite end of the couch, beaming at a screen instead of me. She used to tell me everything. It was the same as life, with a photograph that is beginning to fade. While it is still recognizable and gorgeous, it is gradually losing its color. When I arrived home early one day, I discovered that she was sound asleep on the couch. As she stood next to her, her phone was unlocked. I had a quick look at it. No notifications, no open applications, and nothing else. Because no one's phone is that clean, the fact that it was so pristine frightened me more than what would have happened if I had noticed something suspect. If they're not attempting to verify that it is, then it is not. After carefully repositioning it, I wrapped a blanket around her and sat by the window till she awoke at the appropriate time. She wore a smile, as if nothing was wrong when she finally did it. As I smiled back, I pretended that I was unaware that the distance between us was growing larger with each passing day. Simply because love has the ability to do that at times. For a little while longer, it hopes. Even as it breaks, it continues to believe. I did not know what I know now when I was younger. My ignorance led me to believe that the flaws I observed were merely the surface of something more profound. That the warmth that I had been missing was not gone. The direction had been changed. All that I was aware of was the fact that my wife, the woman who had previously illuminated every nook and cranny of my existence, now had darkness hiding behind her smile. Not only that, but I was starting to worry that those shadows were not mine. There is a distinction between being alone and experiencing feelings of isolation. And it was through the gradual and painful process of learning that lesson from the one who I had once assumed would never allow me to feel either. We continue to sleep in the same bed, continue to say goodnight to each other, and continue to reside in the same house. On the other hand, the connection that we had with one another eventually became stagnant at some point. The experience was similar to reaching for a hand that you are familiar with, only to discover that it does not reach back anymore. There was no dramatic flare that dissipated the warmth. Rather, it dissipated in the calm hum of ordinary silence. After a while, she began to stay out later. However, as time went on, the causes began to melt together. At first, it was fair to work long shifts at work and attend after-hour strategy meetings and birthday dinners for friends. When Janelle wanted to talk, it was one of those nights. The next thing I knew, I needed to get some space in my thoughts. After 10 o'clock at night, there were evenings when she would simply stroll in without providing any kind of explanation, looking exhausted and speaking in a half-mumbled manner. I made an effort to avoid being the husband who overthinks everything. Despite my best efforts, I was not able to ignore her presence. All of the tiny routines that we used to share have vanished. Despite the fact that she had previously stated that Saturday mornings were holy, Mom ceased preparing pancakes for us on Saturdays. As soon as she began sleeping, she turned her back on me. Her phone was pressed against her chest in such a way that it felt like a second pillow. She'd crack a grin. Certainly, but it was the kind of smile you give to a courteous coworker, not the person you have committed to be with for the rest of your life. I was able to arrive home early on a Friday evening. I prepared her go-to dish, which was lasagna with additional ricotta and garlic bread that was toasted perfectly according to her preferences. I even took the time to play her favorite Chili Train record as I lit candles. I wanted to bring to her attention the fact that love was still present in this place. Not until 11:30 p.m. did she arrive at her residence. I sat there with food that was cold, 2 glasses of wine that had not been consumed, and a terrible feeling that the version of us that I loved was quickly disintegrating in front of my eyes. It appeared as though she was taken aback when she saw the table that had been put up. She said, "Oh," while attempting to grin. "You prepared the meal." As I stood slowly, I expressed my belief that we could share a meal together. It's been quite some time. Prior to returning her gaze to me, she stared at the meal. "My stomach is full." Those 3 words struck me more strongly than I had anticipated. It wasn't because of the meal. Rather, it was because she hadn't even considered going to the phone. With a nod, I covered up the disappointment that I felt. "Not a problem at all." She did not inquire as to whether or not I had consumed anything. She did not express gratitude in any way. The only thing she did was slide out of her heels, declare that she was exhausted, and then head to the bedroom. I sat there for a considerable amount of time, just staring at the dishes that were not being used. I eventually put everything away, emptied my glass of wine down the sink, and perched on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep as if she were a stranger I had known in the past. A language of its own emerged from the quiet that existed between us. While we were both aware of the situation, we chose not to translate. When I inquired about how her day was going, her responses shortened in length. "There are no stories, no details, only hurdles. It is fine, busy, and exhausting." Still, I made an attempt to do so. As I was leaving for work, I continued to kiss her on the forehead. Nevertheless, I brought home a few items that I believed she would enjoy. However, I could tell by the look in her eyes that she was not actually present. Not entirely. It seemed as though she had emotionally prepared herself to leave, but she hadn't told me about it yet. For a moment, I let my curiosity to get the better of me. There she was, taking a shower. A notification illuminated the screen of her phone, which was sitting on the nightstand. I was not the type of person to pry into things. Over the course of all of our years together, I had never done it before. On the other hand, I was prompted to stare, not in order to capture her, but in order to comprehend her. As soon as I picked it up, it was completely clean. There will be no messages, call logs. Hers, on the other hand, was neat, chilly, and untouched, much like a demo model. After returning it to its original position, I sat on the side of the bed and listened to the sound of water running behind the door. I was attempting to make sense of the expanding nothingness that was surrounding me. She was not confronted by me. No, not just yet, since I don't even know what to say. Why does it appear as though your phone has been completely wiped clean? If you used to grin, why don't you smile anymore? I'm not sure why I have the impression that I'm living with a complete stranger who used to love me. Instead, I chose to watch. I bided my time. In the comfort of my own home, I retreated into silence and studied the woman I had married as if she were a foreign language. Once upon a time, I was able to speak fluently, but not anymore. Suddenly, the moment arrived that would forever alter everything. On a Tuesday, she arrived at work earlier than usual. The day had been taken off by me. I am beginning to feel the effects of burnout, and sleep is looming heavily over my eyes. The buzzing of her phone could be heard coming from the coffee table around midday. At home, she had neglected to remember it. After staring at it for a time, I made the decision to put it away without touching it. I had anticipated that she would return by the evening, but the phone rang once more at approximately 2:45. It turned out to be Janelle. I paused for a moment before picking it up. "Hey, my name is Julian." It was Mariah, who forgot her phone at home. A pause occurred on the other end of the line. Janelle then remarked, "Oh, that's strange." I was calling to inquire as to whether or not she was still planning to meet me. This caused my stomach to churn. We were scheduled to grab drinks at around 1 o'clock, but she never showed up. Yeah, we were supposed to get drinks. Do not text her or call her. In order to clean my throat. Apparently, she was working at the time. There is again another halt. 1, that is more extensive. Oh, I'm sure there's a mistake in the data. Yes, I stated it in a straightforward manner. It is likely. I hung up the phone and sat there in the silence, feeling the pressure of a single question that I had not been able to answer pressing down on my chest. In all honesty, where was she? Prior to her arrival at my house that evening, I had already finished clearing the table. Just me. There was no music and there were no candles. Taking a seat on the couch while clutching the remote control, but they're not viewing anything. She appeared to be weary. "Hey," she murmured. I nodded and said, "Long day." She blinked and asked, "Where were you?" As I glanced at her, I asked, "At work." "What?" When Janelle called, I was able to see her momentary pause when I said, "We didn't show up for drinks." She froze for a split second, the way that her eyes flashed and the way that her throat tightened up. "I forgot," she remarked in a hurried manner. It was necessary for me to cover a shift. I completely forgot about it. I did not make any statements. Simply got up and walked by her without a word. She went after it. There is no need to turn this into something, Julian. I came to a halt and turned around. "You have already done it." As she stared at me, it appeared as like she was at a loss for words, as if the number of lies she had to tell was too large for her to keep straight. To tell you the truth, I waited for her to speak before I explained. She went inside the bedroom instead, and once she was inside, she shut the door. When she was sleeping well that night, I remained up and slept next to her. Additionally, for the very first time in our marriage, I did not feel secure in her presence. I was under the impression that I was anticipating something that I did not wish to learn, but was already aware of. There was no longer any increase in the distance. The thing was already present, and I was beginning to come to terms with the fact that whatever we had and whatever we were constructing had been broken in ways that I was unable to identify at the time, but that I could feel in every minute of silence. Things were yelling at the same time, which was a Thursday afternoon. Organizing tools that I hardly ever used anymore was what I was doing in the garage. When we moved here, half of them were still in their boxes until we took them out. Once again, I had taken the day off, but this time it wasn't because I was exhausted. Rather, it was because I didn't want to continue to pretend. Make it seem as though everything was well. Try to act as if my wife was not thinking about something else at the time, and perhaps even her very own heart. At that moment, I became aware of the rapid and hurried opening of the front door. I exited the garage and used an old rag to wipe my hands before entering the house. The keys were still in her palm as she stood there in the hallway, her face very pale and her eyes completely crazy. "Julian," she whispered, struggling to catch her breath. I blinked as I heard the words. "I need you to take me to the hospital." With a crack in her voice, she asked, "What happened?" "Tobias," she responded. When I heard that he had been involved in a terrible vehicle accident, I did not instantly answer. Instead, I just stared at her. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was trembling like the ground beneath her had just caved in. "I need to see him," she whispered. "Please." I stared at my wife, the same woman who had been pulling away from me inch by inch for months now. And all I could think was, why him? But I didn't ask that. I didn't ask her why she wasn't calling Janelle or Riley or any number of people who would have understood her panic. She came to me, her husband, and part of me hated how I still reacted instinctively without anger, without questions. "Get in the car," I said quietly. She nodded, grabbed her purse, and followed me out. The drive was silent. No music, no words, just the sound of tires humming against asphalt and my heart pounding like it was stuck in my throat. She had already punched the address into the GPS on my phone and was sitting there hugging herself as if she was trying to hold something together that had already fallen apart. There were approximately 15 minutes into the drive when she spoke. "I didn't think I'd feel this way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't ask how she found out. I didn't ask what hospital we were going to. My eyes were fixed on the road the entire time. I was under the impression that it was finished. Indeed, I did it. I did not make any statements. I still adore him. There was no wind in the car. There was no sharp intake of breath. There was only a sudden stillness that sounded louder than any scream could have been. I think when I heard that he might not make it, something cracked apart in me. And that's when she said it. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Instead, She stared out the window, as if the words hadn't just shattered the remnants of whatever trust one was clinging to. I didn't answer her because I couldn't. I gripped the steering wheel more tightly. My knuckles widened. I didn't even know how I managed to keep driving. The turn signal clicked steadily as I changed lanes, as if the world was still spinning like it was supposed to. She did not say, "I think I still love him," or it brought back feelings. Instead, she spoke it as if it were a fact, as if it had just been waiting in her all this time, huddled in a dark corner until a car wreck forced it into the light. But inside of me, everything had stopped. However, she continued to love him. We pulled into the hospital parking lot. She unbuckled her seatbelt before I'd even turned off the engine. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't respond. She opened the door and stepped out. And just like that, she ran. Ran across the parking lot in her heels like she didn't care about the pain. She ran as if her heart was inside that building. She ran as if I did not exist. She did not look back once. I watched her rush through the automatic doors. I watched as they swallowed her whole. And for a moment, I was unable to move. I just sat there staring through the windshield because I was numb. I believe I remained parked for almost 20 minutes. There was this voice inside me, repeating the same sentence over and over. She ran to him, not you. I didn't follow her in. I didn't want to see the way she might hold his hand or the tears she might cry at his bedside. I didn't want to see the look in her eyes, the one I hadn't seen in months, that soft, aching tenderness that she used to reserve for me. Instead, I drove home by myself. When I entered the house, it was dark. Her coats were still hanging on the hook by the door. One of her heels, which she must have kicked off in her panic, was lying sideways in the hallway. I stared at it for a while. It is strange how your mind tends to focus on things when your life is quietly disintegrating. I walked into the bedroom, where her perfume was still present in the air. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. At that moment, it dawned on me that it wasn't just that she had feelings for someone else. It was the fact that I was the one who had held her during her panic attacks. I was the one who encouraged her when she was unemployed for 2 months. I was the one who had made her feel secure in this world. And in the one moment when she needed someone the most, she did not run to the man who had kept her together for the past 5 years. Rather, she ran to the person who had broken her first. I sat there for hours, not eating, not turning on the lights, and just staring at the door waiting the entire time. Not because I wanted her to walk back through it, but because I needed to know if I was still the one she'd come home to. At 10:07 a.m., the lock turned. I didn't move. She walked in slowly, face red, eyes swollen. She froze when she saw me sitting in the dark. "Julian," she said, stepping forward. I stood up, walked past her, didn't even brush her shoulder. "Please," she said as she turned around as I approached the door. It didn't mean anything. I was in a state of fear. My intention was not to hurt her feelings, but she had. Her truth came out in the most subdued voice I'd ever heard. Yet it screamed louder than anything else could ever hope to. "Because the truth always escapes when we're afraid," she said. I exited the building and shut the door behind me. I did not slam the door. I did not have to. There are certain doors that do not require a loud bang to convey the message. I am finished. I was sitting on the side of the bed, staring at the floor, and I was still wearing the shirt that I had worn the day before. When I woke up the next morning, the home was completely silent. It was not the kind of quiet that you would find at a cemetery. Her side of the bed appeared as though it had not been touched. The sheets still held her shape from the previous night, but the warmth had disappeared, just like the rest of her. I did not hear the shower running, and I did not smell coffee. This used to be her routine. She would start her Sunday mornings with a freshly brewed hazelnut while humming an old Lauryn Hill song. I didn't check the guest room to see if she had slept there. I didn't look for a note. I didn't call out her name. I already knew. Wherever she was, she wasn't here. But that morning, there was nothing. The only sounds I heard were the dull hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the hallway clock. I was reminded that every second was another beat away from the man I used to be. I felt like I was living with someone who had moved out of my marriage several months ago, but had left her body behind. I was going through the motions while her heart was in the hands of someone else. I packed a small suitcase with only the essentials, including 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a hoodie, socks, boxers, and my shaving kit. I felt like I was a tenant in my own marriage. I removed my passport and my birth certificate from the safe that was located in the closet and threw them into the bag along with my laptop. I did not take anything that was significant to her. I did not take any gifts, shared books, or framed photographs. I was not intended to send a message. This was not an act of retribution. Rather, it was an act of release. As I closed the bag, my eyes caught sight of the wedding photo that was displayed on the dresser. We were laughing in that picture. Real laughter. I remember what she whispered right before the photographer snapped it. "Don't ever let me forget this feeling." She forgot. And now so would I. I walked to the kitchen, tore a sheet from a notepad on the fridge, and wrote exactly what I needed to say. No more, no less. "Don't worry, he can have you now." I didn't sign it. I didn't draw a line through it or add a dramatic flair. Just those 8 words left on the counter beside her favorite mug. The one that said, "Mondays made me do it." I stood at the doorway for a moment and looked around. It was strange how ordinary everything looked. The couch where we used to binge watch crime documentaries. The kitchen where I once taught her how to dice onions without crying. The bookshelf we filled together on our 3rd anniversary trip to Asheville. I wasn't walking out of a home. I was walking out of a museum, one where the exhibits had lost all meaning. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. I drove straight to Malik's place on the west side of town. He was my best friend since college. Loyal, blunt, and never the type to pry unless you needed him to. When he opened the door and saw the suitcase, he didn't ask. He just stepped aside and said, "Guest room's clean." I set the bag down in the corner and sat on the edge of the futon. "Is it a terrible thing?" he asked me while grabbing 2 beers from the refrigerator. I gave a slow nod and said, "It's done." He then handed me the bottle and sat down next to me without saying a word. We did not form a toast. We did not say anything poetic. We just sat there like 2 guys watching a storm pass in the distance, knowing that it had already hit one of them. I didn't cry. I didn't punch anything. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how many lies had been wrapped in her goodnight kisses, wondering how many moments had been stolen while I was sitting across from her, pouring my soul into a marriage that she was slowly draining. Later that night, he ordered pizza, and we ate in silence. Every time his phone buzzed, I flinched a little, thinking that maybe she was trying to reach me through him. She didn't, but I knew it was only a matter of time. That first night, without her, felt both unbearable and strangely peaceful. I didn't punch anything, but I wasn't able to. The phrase, "I still love him," played like a scratched record in my head throughout the entire day. I tried to distract myself from the fact that my phone lit up in the morning with 5 missed calls and 2 voicemails, all of which were from her. I did not listen to them, and I deleted them, but I did replay her voice in my mind over and over again. That sentence was not just a betrayal. It was an eraser. She had erased the 5 years that we had built together in just 5 words. That afternoon, I sat down at Malik's kitchen table and opened my laptop. I began listing out everything that I needed to transfer. I went for a walk, made a grocery list with Malik, and even helped him rearrange the junk in his garage. However, nothing could shake that sentence out of my bones. Bank accounts, insurance, subscriptions, emergency contacts. My name was everywhere in her world, just as hers was in mine. Unraveling that web felt like peeling skin off an open wound, but I did it slowly, meticulously. By the evening, more messages came through. "Julian, please call me. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Can we talk? Just once." I turn off my phone, not because of her, but simply to take a deep breath. It is incredible how quickly someone can go from choosing someone else to begging for your attention. One moment, you are just the man she left behind in a parked car, and the next, you are her anchor in a storm that she created. However, I was no longer her anchor, and decisions, even painful ones, bring clarity. She had chosen, and now I was choosing as well. I wasn't going to fight for someone who ran toward her past when the world got hard. I wasn't going to compete with a ghost. I wasn't going to hold space for someone who offered me leftovers while giving her whole heart to someone else. That night, I slept better, not because I was okay, but because I had made a decision. Even painful decisions bring clarity. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And sometimes you have to pack your bag, write your truth on a piece of paper, and walk out. Not because you want to, but because staying would mean disappearing. I didn't disappear. I reclaimed myself, and I left her exactly what she asked for. Tobias, I didn't turn my phone on for 3 days. Not because I was afraid of what I would see, but because I already knew what would be waiting for me. The truth does not remain silent. Rather, it screams in the background. Even when your screen is black and your hands refuse to touch the power button, I needed the quiet. When I was at Malik's place, I adhered to a routine. I would wake up, make coffee, take a shower, sit in the small sunlight kitchen, and scroll aimlessly through articles that I did not care about. Malik gave me space. He didn't engage in deep conversations with me. He didn't ask me any questions that weren't necessary, and he just provided me with silent support. He would leave little things by the door, such as protein bars, water bottles, and even a stress ball. I tried reading a book one morning, but the words kept sliding off the page, as if my mind refused to hold anything new while still clinging to what it hadn't processed. Once he walked by with his gaming headset on, looked at me half smiling, and said, "Bro, you look like a man who just realized the chicken he cooked for years had a second family." I almost laughed. Almost. On the third morning, I took a deep breath and finally powered on my phone. The first thing that hit me was the bus. It didn't stop for 15 seconds. When the screen lit up, it looked like a flood had broken through. 53 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 29 text messages. Every notification came from the same name, Mariah. I stood there in Malik's kitchen, staring at the screen like it was on fire. I didn't open anything at first, just watched the messages stack themselves into a digital monument of regret. I don't know why I did it, but I eventually clicked on the first voicemail. Perhaps a part of me needed to hear it from her mouth again to know that she wasn't a dream I made up, that all of this pain was real, that it came from a voice I used to fall asleep beside. Her voice came through shaky. "Julian, I don't know if you're getting this, but I wanted to apologize. Please. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean what I said in the car. I was panicked. I wasn't thinking straight. I closed my eyes. Funny how panic makes people tell the truth. I listened to another. I went to the hospital again today. He's awake now, but I haven't gone in. I can't. I keep thinking about you, about what I said, about how you looked at me after. Please, can you just call me?" She left another voicemail that same night. "I know you hate me. I know you must, but I need you to hear me. Tobias isn't who I want. He was just a chapter 1 never properly closed. I thought I could bury the past, but when the accident happened, everything just spilled out. Another one. Quieter. I miss you. I miss the way you treat silence as if it were a sacred thing. I miss your stupid humming in the shower. I even miss the way you correct my grammar when I'm texting too quickly." After that, I stopped listening. It wasn't that her words didn't affect me. They did deeply. However, the damage was already done at that point. It wasn't the lie that broke me. It was the choice. After that, everything felt like damage control, emotional public relations, or a cleanup crew arriving after the fire had already consumed the house. She ran to him in her most raw moment, in the kind of emotional emergency that breaks people down to their very core. She reached into her heart and pulled out the truth, and that truth did not include me. That day, I left Malik's place for a walk. It was drizzling, a light rain that barely soaked through, but still chilled your bones. I walked without direction, just letting my feet carry me through the neighborhood. Every couple I passed holding hands felt like a billboard of something I'd lost. A version of love that had once been mine, now a foreign language I couldn't translate. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me. You don't understand what I meant." I was in shock. It was a mistake. I stopped at a bench near the dog park and sat there, watching strangers laugh and throw tennis balls. Life continued on. The world did not stop just because mine had broken. I found myself scrolling through her texts. The majority of them were blurry together. "You're the one I love." I stared at that last one the longest. "You're the one I love." That's the thing about love. It's only as real as the choices behind it. You can say the words 1,000 times. You can write them in the stars. But if your actions contradict them, they become empty, hollow, like saying "I care" while handing someone a blade. I want to believe her. I did. I wanted to think the accident shook her so hard it scrambled her thoughts. That maybe, just maybe, she said the wrong thing in the worst moment. There was just panic confusion, but the truth had already burrowed its way inside me. She didn't just say, "I still love him." She whispered it like a confession, like something she had buried so deep inside herself it came out like oxygen when the lid finally cracked open and I wasn't going to unhear it. She wanted to fix it. He didn't look away from the screen. I thought about it. No. I said I just want her to understand that she broke something that she doesn't get to glue back together just because she's sorry. He nodded slowly. Good choice. That night, Malik made spaghetti. We sat in front of the television watching a stupid action movie. I finally spoke. She wanted to fix it. That's called clarity. Hurts like hell, but it's clean. Later, when I lay in bed, I wondered how many more messages I'd wake up to. How many more apologies. How long it would take before she gave up, before silence returned. Not as punishment, but as peace. I didn't block her. I wanted her to know that I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't coming back. When Riley texted me, "Can we talk?" Coffee. Just us. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't because I didn't know what she wanted to talk about. Rather, it was because I was unsure of what she wanted to talk about. Some people believe that forgiveness is the act of returning to the person who has hurt you. However, sometimes forgiveness is choosing not to let them do it again and choosing yourself. Riley had always been the middle point between Mariah and the world. She was not overly intrusive and not overly distant. She loved her sister, but she saw her clearly, perhaps more clearly than anyone else had ever seen her. Despite the fact that I had a pretty good idea, I didn't respond to it for an entire hour because I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. For the last time, I typed out "sure where," and she sent the address to a cafe that we all used to visit together back when things were warm and simple. Before silence took over my marriage, before I became the ghost Mariah left behind, I arrived early, found a booth in the back away from the windows, and even though the place smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans, I could still smell them. I recalled that Mariah always ordered the same thing, which was a hazelnut latte with 2 pumps and extra foam. I, on the other hand, ordered black coffee with no sugar. I was not looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. Riley came in wearing jeans, a hoodie, and no makeup. She appeared to be someone who hadn't been sleeping very much. When she saw me, she hesitated by the door, as if she was deciding whether or not to stay. Then she took a breath and walked over. "Hey," she said gently. I nodded. "Hey." She sat across from me and wrapped her hands around a mug she didn't drink from. Her fingers were trembling slightly. I watched her, waiting. I wasn't going to break the silence first. "I didn't come here to defend her," she said finally. "Good," I replied. Riley said softly she didn't cheat. Not in a physical sense, but she crossed lines. Emotional ones, deep ones. I leaned back and briefly closed my eyes. "How long?" Riley sighed. "I came because you deserve to know what she didn't say." She nodded again, her eyes focused on the mock. "I came because you deserve to know what she didn't say." A few messages after they bumped into each other at Naomi's wedding last year. At first, it was just catching up. Then it turned into late-night texts. Then venting about work, about you, about the life she felt she settled into. That word stung. Settled. I looked at her, my voice low. "She told you this. She confessed a few months ago, said it was harmless." I told her that she was playing with fire and that she couldn't keep one foot in your life and the other in his past. When she found out that Tobias was hurt, everything that she had buried came up quickly and messy. She said that she just needed someone to talk to who knew her before everything felt routine. However, I knew what was happening. "She told me she still loved him," I said, staring into my coffee. Riley looked devastated. "She didn't mean it that way." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not excusing it," she added quickly, but she said it like someone drowning in memories. Like she confused the man with the moment. Like she panicked and grabbed for the last version of herself that ever felt completely free. I didn't respond. "She's a wreck now," Riley added. "She keeps asking me if you'll ever come back." My heart was already tired of interpreting Mariah's disaster for her. "She's a wreck now." She continues to assert that she was unaware of what she had until it was taken away. My smirk was devoid of any humor. It is remarkable how individuals always come to the realization that they love you the greatest after they have ruined you. The eyes of Riley were wiped. Even though she is still my sister, Julian, I have spoken the truth to her. In this situation, she does not get to behave like a victim. She was the one who caused the situation. She broke the man who was always there for her when she needed him. That sentence left a heavy impression on the atmosphere. The question that I ultimately addressed was, "Why tell me all this? You could have stayed out of it." She responded by saying, "Because I watched you love her. Shining is me. As I observe you devote yourself to that marriage, I was impressed. I observed you shrinking in order to save space for her. As she was carrying the entire thing, I watched you carry it while she didn't even realize she had dropped it. By the time her voice broke, I was unable to maintain my silence any longer. As I swallowed the lump that was in my throat, I turned my head away. As Riley continued, I told her that it's over. If you do come back, it will be a miracle that she burned the bridge, and now she is stuck with the ashes. That is the only thing that will happen." After that, I looked up and our eyes met. This is not going to happen. Riley did not show any signs of flinching. Gradually, she gave a nod. I had a feeling about it, but I believe that you deserve to hear it from someone who wasn't trying to cover their tracks with excuses. This time, the silence that existed between us was more gentle. Just exhausted. I'm not overweight. At the same moment that I was about to leave, Riley reached in her bag and slid something across the table. "What is it?" "For our 3rd wedding anniversary, an old Polaroid photograph. When I was at the lake house with Mariah, the wind was flowing through her hair, and I was wrapping my arms around her waist. The expressions on our faces were filled with great joy, even though we were laughing at something that was probably going to be forgotten." Riley murmured that she on the verge of discarding this item. However, I managed to save it. Just thought you would be interested in remembering the part that actually happened. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. The remembrance caused a pain in my chest. Although I did not cry, I experienced everything at the same time. The photograph was taken by me, and I tucked it away in my jacket. As I mentioned, I'm grateful. To what end? Because of your honesty. The smile on her face was a sad one. In retrospect, I wish things had gone differently. Likewise, I whispered to myself. We remained standing. Just a nod, no embraces, please. My weight began to decrease as I made my way out of the cafe. The wound was not healed and was not completely healed, but it felt lighter, as if someone had finally removed the last splinter and allowed the wound to breathe. Before cranking the ignition, I waited a few minutes in my car before getting out of it. Once more, I peered down at the photograph, each of us smiling. The moment was past, and that version of us was no longer there. Nonetheless, I was no longer angry. I had just finished up. Pain is the source of certain truths, while stillness often yields others. The most difficult ones, however, came from those individuals who witnessed everything that took place and, in the end, were unable to stay silent. I consented to meet her in a public setting, not because I desired to have a conversation, but rather because I thought it was essential, like putting the last brick in a wall that I was well aware needed to be constructed. The kind of location that is ideal for slow chats and gentle farewells, we decided to go with a neutral venue, which was a little restaurant in the heart of the city that was peaceful and had wooden chairs and candles that flickered, exactly like she had done in the past. She chose the booth that was located near the window. I am the one who noticed her before she did. Despite the fact that her hands were crossed in her lap and her knuckles were pale, her eyes were fixed on the condensation that was rolling down her glass of water as if it contained all of the answers that she was unable to discover in me. The reason I approached slowly was not because I was hesitant. Rather, it was because something within me wanted to remember this. It was the way she seemed and the burden that she bore. For years, I'd spent my time analyzing her facial expressions, trying to decipher the subtle changes in her grin and the flicker in her eyes that indicated she was trying to conceal something. However, she did not wear a mask today. Her head was hung low, her body was slouched, and her eyes were exhausted. After I took a seat, she gazed up at me. Nothing to say at first. The only thing she did was take a deep breath, as if she hadn't anticipated seeing me again. "Hi," she hushed in a low voice. "Mariah." She attempted to smile, but it cracked in the middle of her expression. I nodded and looked around the room, which was quite quiet. "Thank you for coming." The only other tables that were occupied were two. Just right. Nothing but the truth, with no audience or distractions. To give the impression that she was hesitating, she reached for her drink, took a sip, and then eventually uttered it. I made a mess of everything. I declined to nod. Not once did I interrupt. The night that you left, I didn't even realize how much it was until you departed. Upon my return to my house and the sight of the note, I found myself unable to take a breath. I remarked that it appeared as though you were breathing normally while you were rushing into that hospital. I didn't sound angry. Rather, my tone was calm and collected. She grimaced in pain. It's true. I was informed by you, Mariah, that you loved him. Are you able to comprehend that? It's not that you didn't miss him. No, you did not become frantic. As you stated, you continued to adore him. In her eyes, tears began to well up. It was not my intention. I solemnly swear. I was completely taken aback. He was on the verge of passing away. It drew me into this long-forgotten recollection of the person I used to be. I said in a calm voice, and don't. Take care not to turn it into poetry. That is not a recollection. One must make a choice. You have created one. I only now, at long last, agreed to it. While she was wiping her eyes, she leaned forward. I have been trying to convey to you, Julian, that what I said earlier that evening was not entirely accurate. It's not true that I love him. No, not really. When I was with him, I adore the person that I was. Inexperienced, naive, and unbroken. However, this does not imply that I desired him. I yearned for you. I seek us out. That you desired me. Bitterly, I repeated myself. You deleted your messages, lied about where you were, engaged in an emotional affair, and then, when the man you claimed you did not want nearly passed away, you went directly to him. The tension in her throat caused her to become quiet. I went there with no intention of reigniting anything. You went there because your heart kept repeating his name over and over again, and I would have been nothing more than background noise. Her response was a swift no. You were never a disruption. In every way, you were ideal. The safety was in you. That was your house. Cold and quiet, I let out a chuckle. However, when people are afraid, they do not run for their homes. In pursuit of what they continue to fantasize about, they run. It was her hands that she stared down at. To hurt you was never my intention. Indeed, I am of the opinion that. Suddenly, her eyes widened in amazement. There is no way that you intended to cause me harm. But love is not evaluated based on intent. It is evaluated based on its impact. And the impact you had was like a sledgehammer to the emotions. Mariah gave off the impression that she was withdrawing into herself. She hunched her shoulders and twisted her hands in her lap as she did so. A hushed voice said, I am aware that I do not merit another opportunity. I responded with a tone that was gentle yet forceful. You are correct. That is not the case. These words lingered in the air as if they were a verdict. And for a span of time, she did not take a breath. I'm not here to exact one's revenge. My statement was that I was not here to drag this out. Your door is left open, and I am here to close it for you. Gradually, she gave a nod. Do you require a divorce? I have already had a conversation with a lawyer. I assured you that you will have the paperwork this week. It is not going to be ugly because of me. I'm not going to take anything that belongs to you. This is all I want, serenity. Although she opened her mouth, she did not produce any sound. After that, I eventually broke down in tears and said, I did not lose love with you anymore. My response was that you simply did not love me enough to protect what we had together. And that's even worse. We remained silent as we sat there. After dropping off the water pitcher, the waitress lingered for a moment, indicating that she had picked up on the tension. She departed in a stealthy manner. I keep waking up and reaching for you, Mariah remarked. I love you so much. After that, I recalled, you're gone. I wake up and remember I'm free. And I responded to that assertion. With a look of complete devastation on her face, she said, that used to scare me, but now it just feels clean. However, now is not the time for her feelings. Not any longer. She'd had a few months to make up her mind about where her heart went. It was her decision. So did I. I still have the anniversary gift you never opened, she whispered. It was a wedding anniversary gift. I shrugged and said, perhaps you should give it to him. That's not fair, she screamed quickly. Don't reduce me to that one moment. It's in the top drawer of my nightstand. When you, of all people, should know that I am more than a mistake, I responded by getting up and saying, No, you are more than that. You simply made the decision to be less. It caused her to flinch. I was not happy to have to say that. The only thing I needed was for her to comprehend the finality. I reached into the pocket of my coat and removed a little envelope, which I then placed on the table. I have written her name in my own handwriting. It was her question, What is this? Closure? I responded by saying everything I needed to say, but no longer want to say out loud. She didn't reach for it. She just stared at the table, face flushed with shame and something close to desperation. I wish I could go back, she mumbled to herself. I said to you in a soft voice, You do not get to. As I stepped into the evening air, I did not feel triumphant. Rather, I felt free. The sky was turning a soft gold color, and the sun was beginning to drop behind the buildings. I left her sitting there, with her hands shaking over her glass and tears on her cheeks. My name was probably echoing in her mind in all the ways that she failed to say it when it mattered the most. The letter arrived 2 weeks after our last conversation, and I immediately recognized the handwriting, which was curved and careful. It was the kind of handwriting that she only used when something truly mattered. I stood there on the sidewalk, breathing in that moment like oxygen that I had been deprived of for too long. There was no going back. But finally, I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. She used to leave me notes in this script, tucked in my jacket pocket, on the bathroom mirror, and in my lunch when I was working long shifts. I used to adore her handwriting. Now, as I held that envelope, I wasn't sure if I wanted to read a single word of it. It had no return address, just my name, and there was no heart beside it like there was in the past. It was just clean black ink. I was sitting on the couch in Malik's apartment, where my life had quietly reset, and I stared at it for a while. My bag was still in the corner, unpacked, and I hadn't hung a single shirt in the closet. I believe that a portion of me was still clinging to the illusion that this was a temporary situation, that I would be returning home soon. However, that word had changed. 48:28, and this letter, whatever it was, felt like a key to a door that I no longer wanted to open. Despite this, I opened it. It was 4 pages long, handwritten, and there were no smudges or scrawled outlines. It appeared as though she had written it carefully and methodically, as if she intended every word to hit exactly where it needed to. The first sentence hit harder than I expected. I don't expect this to fix anything, she continued. By the time you read this, you've probably already filed everything. Maybe you've moved on. Maybe you're done with me for good. But I needed to say this, not for your forgiveness, but for your understanding. And if I'm being straightforward, I shifted in my seat. I've spent the past 2 weeks going over everything. Every conversation, every decision, every moment. I've chosen silence instead of honesty, distance instead of presence, and safety instead of truth. Because that's what it was. Tobias was safe. He didn't demand anything of me. I've spent the last 2 weeks going over everything. He didn't challenge me to grow. He lived in a memory where I was 22 and wild and adored. And when he got hurt, it triggered something deep and unspoken. It wasn't about love. It was about escape. I paused reading. That line sat like lead in my chest. It wasn't about love. It was about escape. That explained a lot, but it didn't change the outcome. It didn't undo the damage. I continued to read despite the fact that you were the real thing, the difficult, messy, magnificent thing. You saw me, all of me, and still chose me. That scared me more than I admitted. Being loved so deeply meant that I had to live up to it. I had to be consistent, present, and honest. I didn't know how to hold on to something that was so pure without wondering when I would ruin it. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. When I said I loved him, I didn't mean it like that, but I know how it sounded, and I know you heard it clearly. I don't blame you for walking away. In fact, I respected because you've always been the one who honored truth, even when it hurt. That's what I couldn't do. That's why you were the better half of us. That line broke something in me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I never was. But hearing her say it, admit that she saw the difference between us, between who stayed loyal and who ran, that mattered. Even if it came too late, I've replayed that car ride in my head so many times. I wish I could pull the words back into my mouth. I wish I had turned to you instead of looking away. I wish I had seen you sitting there hurting and stopped running towards someone who no longer knew me. But the truth is, I didn't stop. And you did. You stopped everything. The dinner plans, the forgiveness, the waiting. You stopped carrying us when I let go. I breathed slowly, folding the top of the page back. I keep dreaming about the little things. The way you used to sing to the dog on bath day. The way you always read cereal boxes at breakfast like it was breaking news. I miss that. I miss the way our silence felt safe, not awkward. I miss our rhythm. The world is so quiet now. Too quiet. She had signed the final page differently. No dramatic declarations. No last-ditch promises. Just this. I don't ask for another chance. I only ask that in some quiet part of you, you remember we were real. That even if we ended in silence, we lived in love for a while. And it mattered. And I folded the letter and held it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just let myself feel it fully. It didn't make me want her back. It didn't make me second-guess the decision I'd made. But it did do something else. It gave the past a little peace. Because in that moment, I realized something important. We weren't defined by the way we ended. We were defined by the fact that for a long stretch of time, we were two people who chose each other. The letter was placed in a small wooden box that I kept in Malik's spare room. Despite the fact that she failed me in the end, despite the fact that she turned away when I needed her to turn toward me, I still carried the best of what we were. This did not mean that I would ever go back. Rather, it meant that I could move forward without feeling any resentment. That night, I slept better. I didn't check my phone when I woke up. I didn't wonder if she would write again. I didn't hope or dread. I just breathed. The letter didn't belong with my clothes or wallet or phone. It belonged with memories, things you respect, but no longer carry about with you every day. It contained a few old things, photos, cards, and a gift from my grandmother, who passed away. And for the first time since I left, the breath didn't catch in my throat. I moved on a Wednesday, the kind of day that's too ordinary to carry any grand significance. No birthday, no holiday, just a regular middle-of-the-week morning. Gray clouds hanging low like someone had draped the sky in damp cotton. It wasn't planned that way. My new lease just happened to start then. Funny how life moves forward on dates that don't feel dramatic. Healing, it turns out, doesn't wait for a perfect backdrop. I loaded the final box into the back of my truck. Just a few clothes, a lamp, a record player, and that small wooden box with a letter from Mariah. I didn't open it again. Malik came outside with 2 mugs of coffee. "So, this is it," he said, handing me one of the mugs. "This is it," I replied. He raised his mug to growth, pain, and starting over. I hadn't thrown it away since the day it arrived, but I didn't throw it away either. There are certain aspects of your life that don't belong in the trash. They belong in the past, intact, unopened, but respected. I clinked my own against this to create a silence that finally feels like serenity. We stood there for a minute on the driveway like brothers saying farewell, despite the fact that we knew we would still see one other. Malik was more than just my friend. He was the witness to the most challenging stretch of my life. The person who never asked for details, but always made space for my silence. That kind of loyalty doesn't get acknowledged enough, but it should think she'll sign the papers. He asked quietly. She already did. I replied, glancing toward the glove box. A week ago. He nodded like that confirmed something he already knew. And you're good. I paused for a moment, watching a squirrel dart across the yard, and then I looked back at him. I'm no longer angry. I have just finished. The drive to the new place was approximately 2 hours outside of the city. I found it on a whim, a small cottage nestled on the edge of a quiet town called Faro. The rent was affordable, and the neighbors seemed to be the right kind of nosy. However, the most important thing was that it was mine. A place untouched by her. A place without memories woven into the curtains or the scent of her shampoo lingering in the air. The first thing I did when I arrived was let Moxie out of her crate. She was a rescue, half border collie, half mystery, all energy. I'd adopted her 3 weeks earlier after walking into a shelter just to look around. Now, she rushed through the empty living room, her tail wagging like a metronome for delight. She had pushed her forehead against the glass and gazed at me with those smart, inquisitive eyes, as if she already knew my narrative. That falsehood had lasted exactly 8 minutes by that point. Yeah, I responded with a grin. I spent the day unpacking, erecting shelves, and making a playlist that I could hum along to without having to think about the past, which had the effect of interrupting the melody. We're going to be okay. I was the final person to set up the record player, and I did so by placing Coltrane's ballads on it as a subtle tribute to the person I was before everything gave way. That evening, I went for a walk to the lake that was nearby. Despite this, it was still introspective, as if I knew how to maintain silence better than the majority of others. The bench that overlooked the water was where I sat down. Moxie cuddled up next to me and allowed the silence to fill the areas inside of me where grief had previously taken up residence. It was no longer a burden as it had been. It seemed to be quite real. Mariah, I had a thought about her at one point. In the same way that someone you used to love used to feel, not in rage, but even in despair. Someone who had entered my life at a birthday party with guacamole on her wrist and a chuckle that caused me to forget my own name. That person. Someone who once inspired me to believe in the concept of eternity, but who, when it counted the most, rushed away whenever it was necessary to do so. Over the course of a great number of evenings, I had spent trying to comprehend the reasons behind her statements. Reasons why she was unable to stop herself. What made me insufficient? On the other hand, the reality is that love is not always about reasoning. It is not always because you are lacking that people depart. Sometimes it is because they are lost. Furthermore, if a person does not wish to return to himself, then no amount of loyalty can bring them back to themselves. Moxie was the object of my gaze. Her curiosity was evident as she watched a duck walk by, and her tail was twitching. In response to her question, I asked, "You've got it all figured out, don't you?" One time, she licked my hand as if she were responding, making spaghetti, pouring a glass of red wine, and writing in my journal for the first time in months were all things I did when I got back to the house. It was nothing significant. It was just a collection of thoughts that were scattered but honest. When I was younger, I believed that love had to be long-lasting in order for it to be meaningful, and that if something ended, it indicated that it was a phony. However, I have come to realize that some love stories are not even full books, but rather just chapters. In certain chapters, you come to a close, not with resentment, but with a respectful acknowledgement of the life lessons that they imparted to you. After I had finished writing in the journal, I put it away on the nightstand and then went to bed. Following closely behind, Moxie curled up at my feet as if she had always been lying there. For a considerable amount of time, I remained fixed on the ceiling, anticipating the return of the pain. It did not happen. This time, not at all. The next week, I went into town and enrolled in a woodworking class that was offered in the area. I needed to produce something again with my hands, with my time, and with my heart. Not because I was good at it, far from it. Rather, it was because I needed to try something new. I talked about old music rather than old wounds, shared a few laughs with a few folks, and met a few new people. It was a pleasant experience. A call came in from Alec one day. "I'm just checking in with you. Do you have a new personality, or are you constructing a cottage out there?" Both of these made me giggle. "You have a lighter tone." "Yes, I am." He paused for a moment. "She gave me a call. My guess was that she is dating once more." Even though he couldn't see it, I gave him a slight nod. "That's good.